Viewer discretion advised.
I don't see anything on my screen either, everyone.
Mic check. Can you hear us now? Give us a wave in the chat. Jump up and down. Flick your lighters. All right. I believe we are live, or a reasonable facsimile thereof. Good morning, Z Horde. How's everybody doing today?
Good afternoon, Z Horde from the UK.
Welcome there for the other host of the show, Unicorps herself, all the way from the UK, Miss Tanya Jones. How are you today, Tanya?
I am great today. Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Again?
Yeah, always glad to have you here. My partner in crime, the Bonnie to my Clyde in this YouTube.
Absolutely.
Whatever we're doing here. Anyway, happy Monday. Columbus Day here in the United States, October 14th. Figures that they would have a holiday for a guy that can't read a map. But more importantly, I think the real reason it's a federal holiday here, no banks, no mail today, is because it's also the birthday of my other half here at the hosting team. Tanya, happy birthday.
Oh, thank you so much.
Happy 21st.
Much love to everybody. I wish.
I like to say I'm 21 with X number of years experience. I started stopping there. Stopped counting at number 21. So how's everybody doing this morning? Let's see who we've got in the chat. Nightbot, welcome. Have you attacked anybody today? Creepy Clown Girl, thank you for modding for us this morning. Don Sharp.
We have Demented Maniac.
All right. Who else is in here?
Who else do we have? And of course we have Andy.
Mambwe Musada. Musanda. Hope I said that right. Glad to have you with us. See if there's anybody else here that I've missed. Unicorp's Tales, you're in the chat as well. And I'm in the chat. Evil
Who's Unicorp's Tales? Unicorp's Tales who?
In the chat.
Thank you so much, Creepy Clown Girl.
We're in two places
and
at once.
Hey to you too, much love.
Cannot be a common occurrence. That's what sort of witchcraft is this? Speaking of witchcraft, let me go ahead and welcome in our guest this morning. Tanya, bring her in.
I'd like to welcome to the show this morning, Andy, Evil Witch Show.
Good morning, Z Horde. Good morning.
Good
morning.
morning to you, Andy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, birthday girl?
Thank you. I am brilliant. Very much happy to be here again on the show, doing this fantastic show.
Thank you for being here with us, Andy. Always a treat to have you here.
Why, thank you.
Become a frequent guest with us. We appreciate that. How much snow do you have in Nebraska today?
We don't have any, but it's pretty cold, so.
Yeah, I just saw it somewhere in Nebraska was getting some snow, and then over farther, I think into Wyoming and points west, they were getting kicked pretty heavily. But it's on the way, I'm sure.
Right. Western Nebraska usually gets pretty snowy, especially with Colorado and Montana getting a lot of snow. So
hopefully it'll let you enjoy fall for a while. Although when growing up in the South, I can remember it spitting snow on Halloween before. It was rare, but it did happen.
It does happen. I know my poor little pumpkins all died because we had a frost.
Oh,
so
had some frost on the pumpkin here in Portland over the weekend too. It's been down in the 30s, and winter's coming. It's the rainy season out here. We don't get a lot of snow,
but you get a lot of rain and gray days.
Oh yeah, and that was one of the reasons I moved here. I'd lived in the desert in Las Vegas for 7 years, and I missed not being able to tell one season from another, and I missed the rain. So I've got plenty of it here. And the soft gray days, those are my favorite days to work on my writing and other projects. It's just something about it. I guess if it's sunshiny, you feel like you should be outside doing something, and if it's overcast and misty and rainy and cold and things, yeah, I'm justified in sitting in the house all day.
Absolutely, I agree with that. I know I always like rainy days myself. So
Tanya, how's your weather? I heard you were out with your daughter over the weekend playing in the puddles or something, like a couple of ducks.
Friday, my son had a little bit of a bad day at school, so me and my daughter had the idea that we put him in between me and her. We find the biggest puddles that we can possibly find, and we jump in every single one of them on the way home.
Sounds like fun, but you said you didn't have your wellies on. You got your feet wet. What's up with
that? We were soaked from head to toe.
I bet you he had a great time.
Catch your death from that. That's what I was saying. Get in this house.
But yeah, once again, it's rain. Rain.
Get a lot of rain and fog there. When I was in England years and years ago, I was amazed at the fog, and it's just so, especially in London, you go out in the fog and it's just so eerie and creepy. I loved it.
I like the woods around here after it's been raining heavily. They look awesome.
Oh yeah, I'll bet. Get a lot of fog here because right on the junction of the Columbia and Willamette rivers here. So you got two rivers and all this fog, particularly in the bottoms here. And it's amazing. I love to get out and walk in the fog before daylight.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get the show started here. I don't see anybody else hopping in the chat yet. We'll shout you out as you come in. Today, we want to talk vampires. And we're not talking sparkly vampires here. If you're into that kind of thing, you're in the wrong place today. No offense, but Bela Lugosi never sparkled. I know that's Tanya and I's favorite movie vampire. What about you, Andy? Who's your favorite movie vampire or fictional vampire?
I love Dracula and Nosferatu, but my favorite is Prince Radu from the movie Subspecies. Full Moon Productions did that, and it was in 1991. And he doesn't sparkle either. He's what I would imagine a vampire to be like. He's pretty awesome.
Yeah, he plays the vampire role pretty exquisitely, I would say.
Yeah. A lot of people haven't seen that movie, but I know I certainly like him a lot. So
I'm searching the corners of my mind. It sounds familiar, but I'm not even sure that I've seen it. So I'll definitely have to check that out based on both of your recommendations there. But to me, just Bela Lugosi will always be the best Dracula, just to me in my mind. But there's some other good contenders out there. But now getting into the lore, the folklore, and the legends, there's a really, really dark side to vampires and vampirism. What say you, Andy?
Well, it is macabre, because if you look at the definition of the original folkloric vampire, it's basically a resuscitated corpse. It's not an immaterial spirit. So you have a vampire that's a walking corpse, but it does have some of the powers and functions of a non-corporeal spirit. So it's really, really interesting. And of course, this reanimated body that comes from the grave, usually at night, comes to suck the blood of the living so it can maintain its power and maintain its unnatural state of life, I guess you could say. It's like dead and undead all at the same time. It's absolutely fascinating. So, and then, you know, when you see a vampire, they're not all elegant and beautiful like Bela Lugosi is. They kind of look like a cadaver. I mean, you've got them very lean, pale. They have a death-like pallor. Sometimes they are very skeletal and withered. If they're really withered, they almost look like mummies. But what's interesting is they're very cold to the touch, but if they eat or they're fattened up, so to speak, on the living's blood, they can be warm. There's always a ruddiness just right around their lips. And the fascinating thing is people always talk about their gleaming eyes or their hypnotic stare. So their eyes are very expressive and hypnotic, and they just kind of pull you into them. So I always found that very, very interesting. And then, of course, how are vampires made? Well, there's a ton of folklore on that one. One of them is if you are a werewolf. You know, the werewolf and vampire are linked together like peanut butter and jelly. They just kind of go hand in hand. But if you were a werewolf in real life, if you were a necromancer, if you were a witch or a magician, and then, of course, if you were unbaptized, if you were born an illegitimate child from illegitimate parents, if you had red hair, or if you had blue eyes. I mean, the list goes on and on. If you were an adulteress, oh my goodness. Then upon death, allegedly, according to folklore, you became a vampire. And of course, if you were ever attacked by a vampire and survived, upon death, you too would become this walking dead. And of course, if you died from your blood being drained from a vampire, you would also rise from the grave and become a vampire yourself. So there is a lot of interesting folklore about the vampire and what happens. Well, and then of course, you have kind of this vampire power, and a lot of the folklore, of course, comes from the Slavic regions and the Balkan areas. A vampire can control and also shapeshift into many animals. We have the iconic bat. We also have the wolf. Any animal or insect of the night. They can change into spiders and flies. They can change into mist or fog and are able to get through keyholes and then rematerialize in your house, probably by your bed, something you don't want to wake up and see. So, and that way you get a lot of the folklore of how ghosts and spirits are. And then you have, of course, the physical side of a walking corpse. So it's all very, very interesting stuff, I would have to say. So, and then some vampires, one of their big powers, well, most vampires, is every vampire that is killed back in the day, there's 5-6 new ones to replace it. So, you know, if you have a vampire that you finally destroyed after it attacked 17 villagers or 17 people in town, those 17 also get up and rise and begin attacking people. So it's almost just a constant regeneration of these vampires coming back. And that's actually quite an interesting power that they do have. The vampire lore that we know today, that kind of came into the Western world from the Eastern world, came mostly from Transylvania folklore in the 18th century. That's when it really entered Germany and England. And what's interesting, if you remember about the 17th century, is this is the age of enlightenment. So you really have the old time folk ways battling it out with the modern people of the time that were enlightened and didn't believe in the superstitions and many things like that. And there was a great outbreak of the vampire activity, and it originated in Istria in 1672. Then it spread to East Prussia in 1710 and 1721. Serbia started up in 1727 and 1732. Prussia itself in 1750. Silesia in 1755. Romania in 1756. And the regions of Russia in 1772. And it really did cause great controversy with the learned classes of the day. And so we have, at this time, some very famous vampire cases that the authorities actually got involved in. The government went and checked this. And they really started a panic in Prussia, East Prussia, in 1721. We have Peter Blagojevich. Did I say that right? Blagojevich?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I can never do that. So I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. This man was 62 when he died. And his son reported that after they had buried him, he showed up at his house asking for food. And of course, the son, who's an adult, knows that his father's dead and tell him, no, I'm not giving you anything. You're dead. And he's like, I will kill you if you do not give me food. He's like, I'm not giving you anything. Get out of here. Because I can imagine how unnerving that would be. Because again, this is not a ghost. This is not something you see through. This is an actual walking, talking corpse that you know is dead, sitting here demanding food. And so he refused. So his father attacked him, and he was able to live long enough to tell his tale before he died. He also attacked 17 other neighbors, and they died from loss of blood. And the Prussian authorities did go in there and check. The villagers were digging up the corpses and disposing of the vampires. And then another famous case is Arnold Pohl. Now, this is interesting. He was a soldier. And I'm thinking this guy's from Austria, but he was a soldier. And when he came home, he confessed to his wife that he was attacked by a vampire when he was on the Turkish-Serbian border. He was in that area in the war there. And he said that when he was attacked, he managed to kill the vampire, and he washed his wounds and his bites in the vampire's blood and ate the dirt of the grave, hoping to prevent becoming a vampire. Well, a few years later, he died in an accident. He was a farmer, and he died in a haying harvest accident. And he very well did rise from the grave and attacked many people in his area. And this is when I believe the Austrian authorities got involved, because people were so panicked and freaking out that the Empress sent them there. And of course, the learned man said, no, there's no such thing as vampires. And she actually put her foot down and said, we're not desecrating graves anymore. This stops now. So that's why he's famous. And these cases are really well documented. There's case reports, there's published books throughout Europe at that time of these two incidents. Because like I said, it was kind of a fad. There seemed to be something that happened where these vampires were just all over the place. And, the concept of the vampire that we have today did not, obviously, where we're getting this folklore from is too early for that famous, wonderful book by Bram Stoker. But the concept of the vampire in the Western world really came from the folklore of the Slavic people. Polish people have a wealth of information on vampire folklore, Hungarian people, and not just the Romanians, but Slavic legends always talk about the vampire or ghosts of dead people, or the living dead corpse reanimated by its ghost. So either the person's ghost goes back into the body, or sometimes in the Eastern Orthodox Church, they believe that there are certain demons that jump into the body and begin to feed off the blood of the living. And as we know, in any folklore, blood is a very powerful thing. It is your life force. Your blood is the life. That is where that pretty much came from. So it's very interesting. And of course, these people had thousands of ways to identify a vampire who was getting out of their grave, and what to do to prevent that. And one of the things that they would do, and it really depends on the region, they would go into the graveyard and see if there was a burial plot that looked disturbed, or like something came out of it, or something was dug up. They would go to the most recently dead when the vampire first started, and they would open up the tombs or the graves, dig them out of the ground and open their coffins, and they would look to see if they were decomposing properly. So a lot of times, if they would find a body that was not decomposing in any way, and a lot of times those bodies that were not decomposed were the vampire. They would have fresh blood on their lips, their hair or their nails have grown very, very long. Their heart had fresh blood in it. So it was very, very interesting how they would go about to find it. In Hungary, they said that the coffins would have tiny little holes in it, just all over the top of the coffin. And that would be where the vampire would turn into a mist or a vapor and get themselves out of the coffin and then rematerialize. So it's very supernatural things. It's very interesting.
Wow, you've done some research there. That's amazing.
It's fascinating.
And I think that a lot of people try to explain it away and say, oh, they suffered from porphyria, or it was ergot or something in the rye. That was explained, or how they explained a werewolf outbreak in France was, oh, there was stuff in the rye bread that was making everybody have hallucinations. But some of this, it's just, and it's prevalent through a lot of different cultures. I know when I was in the Philippines, they have the Aswang, which is their version of a vampire. It separates the upper half of its body from the lower half, and the upper half flies around, and it doesn't have fangs, but it has a sharp tongue that it pierces veins with and drinks the blood.
Yes.
And the only way to kill it is to find the lower half when it's separated and pour salt in there.
Ew.
Way the body can't, kind of like a snail, the body can't rejoin and it dies. And I've often found that a lot of the Christian parts of that, it's the blood, the fear of crosses or crucifixion, that may just be a movie thing. But then also, in particularly in Catholicism, you have saints or nuns who they consider incorruptible, where the corpse never decomposes, that supposedly hasn't been embalmed. So that could lead into that as well. And then you have people like Vlad the Impaler, Dracul, that supposedly drank the blood of people. And
Elizabeth Bathory was another one that did that.
And she bathed in the blood of virgins to keep herself young.
Right, that's true. And the whole thing is just, the whole folklore is just absolutely fascinating. And each region is something different. And I'll give an example of one. Another way to become a vampire is if you eat the meat of a sheep, lamb meat. They eat a lot of lamb over there. It's delicious. But if you eat the meat from a sheep that has been killed by a wolf, you will turn into a vampire, unless you were born on Saturday, which brings me to my next part. When I am born on a Saturday, and so if you look at a lot of Western or even in the hoodoo traditions I've seen, it's considered the most unluckiest, horrible day to be born on.
I was born on Saturday too.
Yeah, the original Sabbath, and the people of the Jewish faith still follow this. A lot of people don't know. Starts at dusk on Friday and ends at dusk on Saturday. So for them, the holy day is Saturday. And it is said that vampires cannot roam at all on a Saturday. They are pinned down in their graves. They cannot get up and walk around. Now, what's interesting is in these Eastern countries in the Baltic regions, children born on a Saturday can see vampires when they're usually invisible. They can also see ghosts and other beasts, but Saturday-born children are the ones that are mostly recruited to become vampire hunters. They're considered born to, it's almost like having a call or whatever, it's being a seventh kid in the Western world. So
I was
if you're
born with a call over my face. So I've heard all that from my grandmother, who her family were from that region of somewhere in Romania. And, so yeah, I was born with a call over my face, and I would always hear how special I was and how gifted. And all right, Gran.
Sorry, but it's Demented Maniac put up in the chat. I was born on a Saturday. I'm safe.
Not necessarily, because what's interesting is to activate your powers so you're not in fear of what you see. Saturday-born children are supposed to eat lamb meat from the sheep that was killed by the wolf. So that's where you get the
Demented Maniac. Was you have you eaten lamb that was killed by a wolf?
Well, I've eaten a lot of lamb in my day. I don't know if I knew it was killed by a wolf. But Tony, you and I were talking about that the other day. We love a good kebab or
oh, absolutely. Lamb kebab all the way.
Had a gyro the other day here in Portland, and just it was great. Loved lamb.
Oh, I bet it was delicious too.
Oh, it's my favorite meat.
So you have these vampire hunters. Here's an interesting tidbit on vampire hunters. There is actually a patron saint for vampire hunters. And the patron saint's name is, I do not know why my dog is barking. I am so sorry. Saint Marcellus of Paris, whose feast day is November 1st, is the patron saint for vampire hunters. He died in about 430 AD. And what's interesting about this legend is, you know, you always hear saints taking on the devil and its denizens, and all these saints have come up against these forces of darkness, but Saint Marcellus is the only one who has ever gone up against a vampire. And according to this legend, there was a cemetery outside of Paris that was home to a female vampire. And in her life, she was a notorious adulteress. And when she died, she rose from the grave and fed on the people of Paris. And of course, turned some of the members into the undead. So Bishop Marcellus entered the woman's tomb and confronted her, killed her. And that is why he is the patron saint of vampire hunter. Wow. So I guess they have a saint for everything.
Yeah, the other day when you were first telling me about that, I think you had mistyped it first and said the patron saint of vampires. And I was like, what? There's a patron saint of vampires? Because there are a lot of patron saints out there. I'm surprised there's not one for vampires, but patron saint of vampires.
Sorry, can I just very quickly just say good morning to Cage Misery, Cisco, hey guys, welcome, thank you for coming, and Mia Mina, hi guys.
Mia Mina, thanks guys for being here.
Good morning.
Story last night that you had premiere on my channel. Everybody's loving Cabin 22, the series there, and they're snapping at the bit for part 3. So I hope you're writing today while you're watching it. There's so many legends like that get a start where there's a nugget of truth, or sometimes a great big flaming chunk of truth in there that will get turned out and kind of rolled around and looked at from different directions. It is amazing. I know there were even cases here. I remember a case I researched in Tennessee where a little girl had died, and they, for some reason, thought she was a vampire, and they disentombed the body, dug up the coffin, and sure enough, she hadn't begun to decompose, and they actually had a doctor medically remove the heart. I think they put a nail through it and burned it, or something crazy like that. But that stopped whatever was going on in this little town that they were blaming on the little girl.
Yeah, that was actually Mercy Brown. And one of the reasons why she's very famous is she actually inspired 2 writers to write about her. And one of them was, they printed in the New York Times newspaper a reprint article from Providence Journal that landed on none other than Bram Stoker's reading desk. And it said Lucy, the character Lucy, is actually based on Mercy Brown. And then H.P. Lovecraft also wrote one of his stories from her, The Shunned House. Mm-hmm. And his reflected the disgust of the Rhode Island gentry that this thing actually happened. It drew national attention. It was about the 1880s in Rhode Island. Exeter, am I saying that right? Is it Exeter or Exeter? I don't know how to say it. I'm sorry if anybody's
I'm not sure either.
So you have the Brown family, and in 1880s, Mary Brown, the mother, died of consumption, which is tuberculosis. That was a very common disease back then, and a lot of people died from it. And then shortly in 1888, Mary Olive, who was the oldest girl, died of it. And then the son Edwin, who was the only heir, he became ill in the 1890s, but he did not die. So his father sent him to Colorado. And of course, eventually they thought he was well enough to come back. And then we have Mercy Brown, who died in January of 1892. So the villagers were starting to get suspicious. All these people in this family are just dying away. And the villagers started to claim that they thought that they saw Mercy Brown herself shortly after she died, walking around the graveyard and the nearby fields at night. So they went and exhumed the Mary and Mary Olive, and their bodies were decomposing. Well, because Mercy died in January, she wasn't buried yet. They put those coffins kind of in a crypt or an area because you couldn't dig in the ground at that time to bury the winter bodies. So they were left in their coffins interned above ground. And when they pulled her out, there was no decaying. There was liquid blood in her heart and other parts of her body. And then her nails, they noticed that her old nails fell off, and in the place was these long, Nosferatu-like nails. Mm-hmm. And her hair grew really long, and the body had moved. It was in a completely different position. So they had the local doctor there with George Brown, the father. And of course, they didn't want to do it. They were a bit more educated, but the villagers just kind of really insisted, oh no, something weird is going on. So what they did was they cut out her heart, and this is very common. You'll see that the heart is cut out and burned to a powder, because if you leave any part of the skin or anything left that is not burnt to a powder form, the vampire will regenerate. So a lot of times the burning is the last resort, but they did burn her heart into a powder, and they mixed the powder into a drink for the brother to drink. And Edwin drank that, but he did die a few months later of tuberculosis. So of course you have the learned elite members of society going, see, your stuff is stupid, it didn't work. Well, he did not drink that to stop his tuberculosis. He drank the water with the powdered heart mixed into it because that was it was a magical cure, I guess is the best way to describe it. So he would not rise from the dead. They did it to cure his vampirism because he was already being attacked and drained of blood from his sister, Mercy. Mm-hmm. So he died a few months later. You do not hear anything about him getting up and walking around. But like I said, it was a huge controversy because a lot of people were embarrassed. They called it a national disgrace. It was getting, like I said, Bram Stoker even heard about it. And so that's where Lucy kind of came from. There was also Frederick Ransom. Now, this kid was from Vermont, and he was at Dartmouth College, and he passed away, and of tuberculosis also. And they were being very critical because his father and the villagers claimed he also rose from the dead and started coming around. So they took his heart out and burned it in the blacksmith's forge. And, there's a lot of folklore about blacksmiths being natural magicians and naturally immune from a lot of supernatural events themselves just because they're blacksmiths. So they had that burned. And I'm not sure, I don't think anybody drank those ashes, but they probably sprinkled the heart's ashes on top of the grave, which is another way that you get rid of vampires. Usually the first step in killing a vampire is you drive a stake through the heart, but you can't hit it with a hammer, boom, boom, boom. It has to be one time. You take of hawthorn wood or any kind of sacred wood, usually hawthorn or some type of thorny wood, like a rose bush, anything like that has thorns on it. And you make the stake and you take it and you have to drive it straight through in one blow, or you will not pin that spirit. And other times they would fire a pistol shot. And of course, It's made from silver, the bullet, and usually it's a silver crucifix that's melted down because vampires do not like silver. I don't know if they're allergic or what it is, but we know silver is a white metal and is considered a pure metal. So a lot of the crucifixes and things like that were made of pure gold or pure silver. It's not like today where you get kind of a mix.
Yeah, it's the same kind of method for werewolves, am I correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
It's the same kind of method to kill werewolves, the silver.
Well, yes, because werewolves.
That may be where that possibility comes from with vampires and werewolves being linked. Is that where the possibility of the silver killing the vampires could originate from?
Yes, and they also said that silver would also kill witches as well, because back in the day, witches were seen as a form of otherworldly spirit or something in the realm of the supernatural. And as a matter of fact,
supernatural force.
Yeah, I've got a great video on my channel that Heather Moser did as an article she had written about witches and silver bullets, and either go to her blog or my channel and check that out. It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So silver, and interestingly enough, in the old days, mirrors were backed with pure silver. So that is why a vampire can't see his reflection, because there's silver in it. That's why they don't like mirrors. And also because the vampire is considered completely soulless. So that's something else to think of. And so in Poland, what they would do to protect themselves from vampires, they would take the blood of a vampire that had already been staked or decapitated. And usually when they decapitated the vampire, they did put garlic in the vampire's mouth. And they would mix the flour and blood together and eat it. And that was supposedly supposed to keep you safe from the vampire. And then, of course, we also have garlic flowers. They put them in the windows. A lot of times they would make wreaths of the garlic flowers and throw them on top of the coffin. Just stuff like that. It was so interesting. You can shoot a vampire with a silver bullet at night, but the hunter has to be very careful because, again, that hypnotic stare kind of stops them. I think that's why, and vampires are not immune to sunlight. These vampires can walk about in the daytime with the sun shining. It's just that usually they are more active at night. So I found that interesting. Also, the beheading in some places in the Baltic areas must be done with a sexton's blade in one blow if they can get that done. Now, the Albanians, instead of using a wooden stake, they would have a dagger that's shaped like a cross, probably made of silver, or iron is another one that they don't like. And they would use that to stake it in the heart. And then what I found interesting is in some regions, and I believe this is Romania, when they remember how I've said before, people used to lay out their dead in the houses. And on the third day, the women would go and they would burn incense. And as the body was being buried, they would take 9 spindles and they would thrust them deep down into the grave as a form of pinning the spirit into the grave where they could not come out. Excuse me. And then they also used iron skewers where they would put them deep into the ground in the hope of pinning it down, because evil things shun iron as much as silver. They just do not like it at all. So I always thought that was interesting. Of course, everybody knows about garlic. Garlic's a very purative herb. It's very protective. So that's why they would use a lot of garlic. They would take it and rub it against their doors, their thresholds, their windows, their chimneys, their keyholes, anything to keep these vampires away. That especially came out for some reason on St. George's Eve. So that's a very active time in this culture's folklore where witches and ghosts and werewolves and vampires were all out and about running around on St. George Eve.
Wow. And I put a link in the chat there. You can see some pictures of, I think those are reproductions, but it's what supposedly a vampire hunting kit looks like. Very
Yes.
interesting stuff. Now, there are actual antique vampire hunting kits. There are a lot of forgeries and, like I said, reproductions on eBay and Etsy and places like that. But what do you think it was about garlic? Is there a mystical property or some sort of curative property in garlic? Why garlic?
You know, from what I understand, the thing that I remember about garlic, and I read this in a Kentucky Superstitions, and I cannot think of the two authors' names right now that wrote it. But if you want to, you know, bring money into your house, you burn onion or garlic peels. And garlic has always been known as a very protective herb. And I think it probably comes back from Greece and Rome, where those people would protect themselves from ghosts or the dead trying to come at them and also drink their blood. But they weren't corpses, they were ghosts doing that. So I think a lot of times the vampire mythology just kind of blends together. And garlic was the herb that did that. Garlic is under the care of the planet Mars. Garlic and onions. So you have this god of war, and also in Nordic tradition, it's under Tyr. Who's got one hand. You remember the wolf bit off his hand, but they believed that he was actually the main god before Odin, where he was running everything, and he was a war god. And after he was wounded, Odin kind of came in and had to take over a lot of his duties. So you have two very powerful examples of powerful gods that garlic is their thing, because they called it a spear, or a speared leek is what they used to call it in the Germanic traditions, because it looks like a spear, and one of Tyr's main weapons is a spear. And I just touched on that when I saw it. I didn't really dig into it as much as I wanted to, because I personally really like Tyr. I think he's pretty awesome. But yeah, so so you have all of these different cultures where it's a defensive and purifying plant. I mean, if you want to keep a lot of critters away from, like your tomatoes, you plant chives, which is part of the onion family, and garlic and all sorts of stuff around it. It's very, very interesting. Very interesting stuff.
I eat a lot of garlic. I eat it for its health properties. I'll just sometimes like chop it up. You're supposed to let it sit, let it aerate for a while, and then just eat a spoonful of it, wash it down. It helps with all kinds of things. It can help with a toothache. It can help. It's supposed to be good for the blood, good for the blood pressure, all kinds of different things. I do a lot of cooking with it, but it's best, I think, in its raw form. If you can stand it, just chop it up, let it sit for a while, and then just chew and swallow.
Right. And not only that, the people were doing that. Like I said, on St. George's Eve, they would definitely do that. What I found interesting, and I cannot remember the name of the person that Devereaux got it from. Devereaux writes a lot about geomancy and ley lines. I cannot remember the book. Steve, do you remember the book that I'm talking about here?
I'm drawing a blank right now.
Well, what's interesting about this is he compiled a lot of information on ley lines and had a lot of really interesting symbolic landscapes. Glastonbury Press, 1992, Paul Devereaux.
Okay, I was thinking of the Corliss. He compiled a lot of stuff about ley lines and natural weather phenomenon things too.
And he used the Old Straight Track 1925 by Alfred Watkins was one of his big resources that he used. Now, what's interesting is it's considered that Paul Devereaux got a lot of authentic evidence for a concept that spirits travel in straight pathways across the landscape. And I know that there was something written in German, somebody interpreted it, but they called it ghost roads. And on these ghost roads that are straight lines, the wild hunt travels on these lines. And it could be, it usually starts in a cemetery or ends in a cemetery, and it will go over forests, it will go over mountains, it will go through towns. These things will go by houses that are near these ghost roads, so to speak. And even witches and the shamans from like Siberian stuff would also travel these roads, spirit travel along with all of these beings and denizens on these otherworld journeys. So, you know, a lot of times, and of course this started, or actually it's coming up, you know, everybody thinks Halloween is, oh yeah, Halloween's spooky, okay, back to normal. It's not. Because as we know, the time of misrule, the Lord of Misrule himself is elected on October 31st, and it goes through the eve of Candlemas, which is February 1st is when it ends. And this is the time of year where these roads are opened and you have all of these different beings coming through. And the 12 nights of Yule are actually considered the time between the times. So you have a lot of vampiric and werewolf activities going on at this time, because remember, the vampire and the werewolf, I mean, they are really, really together. Like I said, werewolves are turned into vampires, supposedly, to folklore when they die. And they're really in this realm. It's a very haunted realm. It's like an in-betweenness. And they're prowling the world's outer edge between our world and the other world. And it's really the place, these places are the realm between the dead and the living. So that's something to really, really think about.
Fascinating stuff. Artzilla, Aisha, how are you this morning? Thank you for joining us. H Misery, I don't know if I said hi to you or not. This is just a fascinating topic, you know, on and on here, but unfortunately we're about to run out of time. We've only got about 5 minutes left. My other host there, Tanya, I know you've got to go take care of your children, but just want to say again, happy birthday. Andy and I kind of conspired together to put this episode together as a birthday present for you. So,
thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and it's been brilliant listening to every single bit of it. I could listen to Andy talk all day.
Oh, thank you.
I really could.
Fascinating.
You know, it's all been incredible listening to all of it, and
Eric and arcane knowledge.
Thank you so much for.
Why?
Well, thank you all so much for all of my birthday wishes, and it's been really great to be here with you all again. I've really enjoyed it once again. Thank you.
Many happy returns on the day, Tanya.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. But unfortunately, I have to wrap it up from here. But I love you all so much, Z-Horde family, and I will see you all again very soon. Much love to you all. Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Yeah, have a good day. Our love to the kids and Billy. Can't forget Billy.
Yes, don't forget Billy.
Those of you who don't know, Tanya has a spirit child that lives in her home with her and her children. She's got a great video of that over on her channel, Unicorp's Tales, about Billy. And I've heard what I think might be an EVP in there, so definitely check that out and see. I also wanted to ask Dezombified, somebody was reporting that they heard an EVP on our stream last week. Did you ever go back and check on that? It's in the chat there, or I don't think that was the EVP I was thinking.
Much love to you all. I shall see you all soon.
All right, have a great day, Tanya.
And you all. Bye-bye.
Bye, Tanya.
Bye.
But yeah, it was great the way it worked out. Andy and I were conspiring, and I said, when found out she would come on and do the show about vampires and villains, because Tanya has just become the other host of this show. And And I said, yeah, Tanya will be over the moon. And I had messaged her when she got up the next morning and said, hey, guess what? Andy's going to be on. We're going to do it for your birthday. And she's like, oh, my God, I'm over the moon. And it was just like I had predicted exactly what she was going to say word for word. So that was good.
So sweet.
Thank you for being here. She is. She's a delight. I love having her on with me. Just we make a good team, a good pair here.
That's true. She's the perfect co-host.
Before we wrap it up here, I want to remind you guys, take a look at the Teespring store. Got some wonderful Dezombified merchandise in there. There's mugs, hoodies, T-shirts, stickers. Got that awesome Yeah Man TV artwork there, the zombie with the exposed brain.
A lot of great stuff.
Everything in there. Still waiting for Kenny to model those leggings. I keep talking about that. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to put enough energy in there. It's going to be a thought form. And Kenny will be able to not safe for work pay-per-view. But yeah, there we go. It's got it on the screen there. Get those mugs. Gotta do custom mugs for you like that one in the middle there in pink. Creepy clown girl. What better way to get defunkified than to get dezombified? How about that? Love and just amazing stuff. And if you don't want merchandise in particular, I mean, you could buy something and give it to somebody else. Makes great gifts for men, women, children, animals, whatever. I know Mulder, my dog, he would love one of those cups to drink coffee out of. He's like me. He's got to have his morning coffee. He likes his with milk. But check out the Teespring store. But if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to buy merchandise, Dezombified gratefully accepts donations. Every penny that comes in from any source goes into making the show better for all of us and for me and my platform here, which I think I like to bring in people like Andy that just happened to discover through a little quirk of fate there on Twitter, and she's become one of my favorite guests. Andy, would you consider coming back sometime and doing another continuation of this vampire?
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Deal. And amazing stuff. But if the other thing you can do in the chat is do what you're doing right now. Show up, participate, or lurk. We don't care. No judgments here. You can be sure and like, share, and tell a friend. Sub to the channel if you haven't already. And I don't know if it's just me. Is anybody else having a problem with the like button this morning? Every time I click it, it unlikes itself. And I actually took a video of that with my phone, sent it to Dezombified. It'll be in your Facebook DMs. Had to stop for a minute and remember where I sent it. But Andy, thank you once again. I'm going to go ahead and bring Dezombified in and let them say hi to everybody. Come on in, folks. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Steven. What is up, Steve?
How's it going? Hey, how's it going? How'd you like that defunkified? I thought you might appreciate that.
No. Oh man, I'm so sorry, guys. I've been a little scatterbrained lately, and I totally forgot about that EVP that I was supposed to isolate from the other stream the other day. Any of you remember which number stream that was?
I was on my show, so it had to be Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday last week, I believe.
Okay.
It was Wednesday.
All right.
I'm not 100% sure that.
No, I'll definitely check it out because that really did intrigue me. There was 2 different people right in the chat saying they heard that, so I want to definitely get that done.
That wouldn't be the first time. It was that one time when I heard somebody whispering a female voice. You guys heard it and thought it was here with me, and it wasn't.
I remember that.
You guys, it wasn't me, and the chat was hearing it. So strange things happen sometimes on this show. That's one reason to show up. Every time there's a stream, you never know what's going to happen.
Okay. Yeah, that is true. Expect the unexpected here at Dezombified. That is way too funny.
Andy, thanks again for being Tanya and I's guest today. We loved having you on. We're going to have you back. Already planning that. I could listen to you for hours. I wish we had unlimited time here. We've got another show, I believe, coming up after this one.
Wait, we have another show coming up? No, we do not. We don't.
Tomorrow,
Well,
Evil Outcasts and Philia. I mean,
continue on here, Andy.
Outcasts and Creepy Clown Girls tomorrow.
If you have more time, we can go longer or have you back, whatever.
He said. Steve says if we have any more, if we
Sure,
have
if
more
you
time,
want
we could
to.
go longer.
So go ahead, do it, baby. Do it!
Woo! Sure, I have a little bit more time, so I'd be happy to spend it with the Z Horde family and Dezombified.
Aw,
And you need a little break or anything? Z Horde anthem before you start again, or you want to just go right into it?
We could do the Z Horde anthem. You know that's my favoriteest thing.
All right. Okay, everybody. All rise to the Z Horde anthem. Get up, shake your booties. The seventh inning stretch here. Shake it like a Polaroid picture.
Aisha wants to join for a bit. I see you, Aisha. Good morning. Good morning, Horror by Numbers. I see you too.
you have to put on your headphones.
Good
That we're
morning.
now singing the Z Horde anthem.
Oh, I'm
baby.
sorry. I didn't know that.
Oh, okay.
Wait,
So,
the anthem to start here.
all right, you guys go
Here we go.
and stretch out your legs. I'm gonna put the Z Horde anthem on.
Horror by Numbers says he hear an echo, huge echo.
Oh, okay. Bye bye, guys. You guys continue the show. Bye. This one goes out to all you Dezomba friends, the Z Horde. We want you to know just how much we love you.
Shout out to Philia Noctis, creepy clown girl, dark carnival got this. A local nightmare, it's so amazing. Puerto Rican Jose's entertaining. Dark waters, dog man is twisted. Aisha 1994, really gifted. Dustin Flemings, stronger than the rock. Hellfire's out here making everything hot. Yeah, Braden 23 of fire is a G. We're kryptonites down, Kitty's family. Now there are times when we all need gore. Danny Martians in the house, never know what's in store. Mandy Mortem is legit and a queen. Got the grows enchanting, she's on the scene. 13 past midnight, things that go bump in the night. Gory B, horror addicts are out of sight. Big ups to the late horror show. Emily's Adventures in Horrorland, here we go. And you know we gotta keep them dice rolling. MD Who Entertainment, she's been chosen. Give it up for the evil outcast. Swedish mom is dope, yo, you know she got class. So if you get bad vibes from storytelling, then these monsters in my mind will leave you yelling. You see, we all about hearing stranger stories on the creeps. So sweet, she really got love for me. Penny tails up, narrating for the win. Queenie Tade amazing, but real dark and grim. The Mentor Centaurs, Flickathon, Swamp Dwellers. Scolded 22, they be our fellas. Anime tone, time he lives. A fantastic panic, deep paranormal history, great graphics. What's up, Bullis Greedia? I meant CP. I'm gonna guess so bent with nefarious TV. Slumberies are the morbid. Cap 7, truly salmon. And we can never forget about Karen. 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 Karen.
All right, I believe we are back. Let us know in the chat there if you can hear us. We're going to continue on here with Andy Ivanovich, sure, and her amazing knowledge of all things vampire there and how it kind of ties into other myths and legends and folklore. Is he still waiting? Can I get a mic check from the chat, please?
Can they hear us?
Can anybody hear us out there? Okay, I'm getting reports in my headphones here that sounded good. I wanted to ask, I asked earlier and I didn't notice if anybody responded. Is anybody else having trouble with the like button, or is that just me? I've clicked it several times and it goes blue and then the light goes away. So go ahead, test out the like button. I sent a video of it to Miss Stereo that I took with my phone, so we'll see what happens. Hey, Aisha, would you want to call in? You want to come in on the Hangouts? You need a phone number? How would you like to come in and talk to us? Do Hangouts? Okay. Okay, the link is in your Twitter DMs. I already got it, Miss Stereo. So we're gonna have Aisha come in. She's got some questions. Hope everybody enjoyed the anthem there. Got to stretch a little bit. And see if you had one of those Dezombified bugs, you could be rehydrating yourself or whatever, drinking your favorite libation out of there. Anything from ice water to corn liquor. I was listening to Cisco's story last night. She was talking, the characters in her story, a couple of them are moonshiners. So I've got that on the brain this morning. And I'm kind of curious as to how Cisco knows so much about moonshine making. I'll have to quiz her about that.
That is interesting. Not something I'd want to drink, though. I'm kind of a lightweight. I don't think I could handle moonshine.
They call it popsicle for anything. I knew people, or probably still know people. I don't know if they still do or not, but I knew people in East Tennessee that were very fond of it and made it on a regular basis. And it's way too powerful for me. No, thank you. Just the smell of it is enough to make you drunk. And then I tried a few sips and it's like, wow, no. Okay, Aisha, go ahead and check your Twitter DMs. Come on in when you can. And I think that maybe in Nebraska there, Andy, with all the corn, that might be a good hotbed of moonshiners, or does it not work that way?
Oh, I don't know, but I know they're making something out of that corn more than just eating corn. I mean, they make gas and everything out of it. So I suppose they have corn alcohol, but it's industrial. You don't want to drink that. This isn't prohibition. You don't.
Bathtub gin, and you can get Everclear, which that's pretty close to moonshine. Moonshine's a little higher octane than that even, but sometimes when they're making the shine to give it a little extra kick, they'll put the other types of alcohol in there in small amounts, and that's another reason. I mean, there's no quality control. You never know what you're getting. There was some people that died in East Tennessee. The guys had salvaged an old radiator off a truck or something, I think, in a big truck, and we're making moonshine in it, and we're lead poisoning people with it. So,
oh my goodness!
Like my liquor taxed and bonded. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, in Prohibition, we had a lot of runners. We had a lot of great stuff in Nebraska. We were on the jazz trail where all these great jazz musicians would come in on their way to or from Chicago. And a little known fact, Al Capone's older brother went to World War I. He was a veteran, and he changed his name and moved to Nebraska, and he was the sheriff of a small town in Nebraska. And he would pull those moonshiners over, and that's a couple of them recognized him as Al Capone's brother. Of course, he wouldn't have anything to do with the business, but they were very, very fond. Al Capone and his other brothers and family were very, very fond of this older brother. So it's an interesting little story how he became a small town sheriff. And you could not pay him off. He was incorruptible. He was a very good sheriff, and the townsfolk really loved him. And when they found out he was Al Capone's brother, I guess the press or somebody did, they ran them out of town. They were not going to mess with their sheriff. So, and you'll notice that about a lot of Nebraska people. You could be completely different as night and day. If you're your neighbor, you know, if that's your neighbor, you defend your neighbor. So very neighborly type of people, really set on community and family and the areas that they're in. So
Amazing.
And obsessed with football. I am not a football fan, so I won't get into it here.
Yeah, I don't get me started on anti-football. East Tennessee, the University of Tennessee Volunteers, that's religion. Their people, their blood runs deep orange, and I had enough of it when I was on campus. And then later on, just 120,000 plus people descend on Knoxville anytime in the fall when there's a football game. And if you've got to do any shopping or want to go pick up some dinner, better do it during the game, because once the game lets out, everything is packed, traffic, bumper to bumper. I'm just not a big fan of football. I'm sorry. If you love it, hey, more power to you.
Right.
Aisha's having some technical difficulties there. Oh, are you with us, Aisha? Did it stick this time? Oh, I see her coming into the hanghouse, and then she drops back out. We'll go ahead and continue here. Aisha keeps trying.
Okay.
Oh, Mighty Might sent a tweet. He made a Dezombified cookie. We were talking about that this morning. I think the picture is on Twitter, on the Discord there. I was saying that sounds like something they could get at Carvel's. You get Cookie Puss and Fudgy the Whale, and now the Dezombified cookie. I don't know if I'd want to eat it though, or just put it up and look at it. Yeah, take a look there. It's on the screen now. Oh, that's amazing. Mighty Might got some skills there. Got the brain and the one eyeball there. Like he's got some other Halloween things going on. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna go look that up. So.
Yeah, I keep forgetting you can't see the screen.
I cannot see the screen, everybody. So if you're here for me and I didn't shout you out, I'm sorry. Hello, and thank you for coming. I can't see the screen. I'm on my phone, and it's not very tech savvy. That's for sure.
Horror by Numbers said football is soccer over here. I'm not sure where he's at, probably in the UK or maybe in South America. Horror by Numbers, who's your team? Who do you support? If I'm rooting for someone in the UK, Manchester United is my team. I've made people mad saying that before, and I asked one British friend of mine, and I said, who's your favorite team? Man U, and she was, I believe, an Arsenal supporter.
Oh.
She called me every name in the book.
I bet she did. They are very particular about their teams over there.
And yeah, they take it very serious, and have the whole hooliganism thing where if you're on the wrong team and in the wrong, or a supporter of the wrong team and in the wrong part of town, you might get a boot in the arse, as they say.
Yeah, that's true. At least Nebraska fans are friendly. I mean, if you're from the other team, they'll be giving you hugs and buying you beers and hanging out with you just like you're their best friends. You just wore the wrong color that day or something.
Yeah, Tennessee's big rivalry was usually Florida and Alabama, sometimes Kentucky and Arkansas, but it would get ugly sometimes after. I remember one year Bama whipped us pretty bad, and there was an RV rolling across campus after the game had let out, people everywhere, and it had Roll Tide on a banner hanging down the side. It got pelted with beer bottles and whatnot, which, that's no way to have fun. But it looks like Aisha's still having difficulty there. Aisha, if you want to keep trying, we're going to go ahead and go back into the vampire lore and legends here.
Okay.
And, where did we leave off? We were talking about the curative properties of garlic, I believe.
Right. And garlic is just a big deal in a lot of different witchcraft branches and things like that. I think a lot of the herbs and the curative properties and stuff like that being aligned with planets probably came in and around the 15th century, because that seems like the time when alchemy became the big thing. and you see a lot of alchemy type things coming into witchcraft, like planetary alignments and different metals being assigned to different things, like silver to the moon, iron to Mars, and then you have gold to the sun, and just different properties, and also stones doing that. So it really started weaving its way into the witch's craft in the 15th century, and then it just kind of goes from there. So, but there's a ton of folklore on garlic. I mean, we could do 5 shows just on garlic alone. It seems to be something that every culture and every type of people, from the Greeks to the Romans to the Germans to the English and all the way to the Americas, can really, really agree on. And even in the Eastern world, where you have China and all of those places, really have a thing for garlic. I mean, it really, like I said, if it works, people make note of it and then just kind of stay with it. So.
And it's so good and so good for you. That's the amazing thing. I love garlic. I make my own bread. I make my own garlic spreads. I'll sometimes just bake some garlic, boil it in butter, and wow, it probably doesn't smell very good to the folks around me, but you can take a little parsley with the garlic and it'll get rid of a lot of that smell that's associated with it. I've actually gotten to the point where I smelled like an Italian restaurant. I think I'd eaten so much garlic that it just permeated my skin, like oozing from my pores. I know that sounds.
Oh God, delicious.
I still, even my dog Mulder loves garlic, and dark garlic is good for dogs too, where onions is bad for dogs and they shouldn't have very much at all. And you can give them garlic. It helps with a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's like, Aisha, are you with us now? Did it stick finally? Nope, she dropped off again. She's having some kind of weird problems this morning. Apologize, Aisha. And just, like I said, keep trying. If we can get you in here, be happy to have you. But yeah, the garlic and a lot of the spices and things, and that's just, they have mythical proportions, not only cooked with, you can cure with it, and just, it's an amazing, amazing plant when you look into the history of it and how it's grown and cultivated, and you can dry it, you can do so many different things with it.
Oh, I know. And the nice thing about garlic is it lasts through the winter. I mean, you dry it and you have it up. You always see those beautiful garlic ropes and wreaths and stuff like that. And so it was a nice thing to add to all of your meats that you were cooking and other things that you had stored over for the winter time. So it's a very friendly herb. I mean, people really like it, and it seems to really like people. So that, yeah, garlic. Everybody always goes for the garlic, but it's true. Garlic will protect you from vampires. So it was really nice. New England is just abound with all sorts of vampire lore. And before Mercy Brown, they went back 150 years, the Tillinghast clan, and then you also have the Harris, Spalding, and Staples. And this was pre-Revolutionary War, Western Rhode Island. And these clans would go out. They had a vampire scare, and so they would go out and burn the hearts of the suspected vampires as well. And a lot of times you'll see a lot of vampire lore linked with plagues or with tuberculosis in general. We just found the cure for tuberculosis, and even with modern medicine, it's very, very tricky to get rid of that. That is some nasty stuff to catch, and it's just terrible to have something like that. But again, these vampires in New England were doing that. I mean, they just went, and a lot of times vampires were blamed, vampiric women, should I say, along with witches, were blamed for the bubonic plague that we had, or the Black Death. going on in the Middle Ages. So it's very, very interesting that another part of the folklore of vampires is that they are plague spreaders. So I always found that fascinating. And then in the Rhode Island and the New England area, other suspected vampires, one was Annie Dennett from New Hampshire. And this happened September 1810. Very similar case to Mercy Brown. Another one that we have with Annie Dennett that's a little different is Enoch Hayes Place. A lot of people don't know much about him, but he wrote some books back in the day. And he was a free will Baptist minister from Vermont. At this time in the Americas in the 1800s, they had what they called the Enlightenment period. You had a lot of religious revivals. Everybody kind of slacked off a little bit. And then all of a sudden there was a lot of there was Protestant ministers going all over the place. There were new branches of religions coming out. Mormonism was one. Spiritualism started, sneaking its way in. I mean, just a lot of different religious revivals. So we had this Baptist, Enoch, that went to her exhumation. And her father was also sick with tuberculosis. So the villagers believed that they saw Annie Dennett running around and believe that she's the reason why her dad had tuberculosis. But what's interesting in this one is her body was decayed. So she was not the vampire that was going around. So I always thought that was interesting, but just as a precaution, because like I said, sometimes vampires can still be very leathery and leather-like, mummified, look like a mummy, or skeletal and still be a vampire. So they still did the procedure of taking her heart and burning it. And a lot of times they would take the heart and burn it first. And then if that didn't work, that is when they decapitated the vampire and put garlic in its mouth. And then they would also try to pin it down. And then if that didn't work, that is when they burned the body. And a lot of times, especially in Christianity, they did not want to do that because in those days, it was believed, that cremation was this horrible thing because you would not be resurrected on the resurrection day and you would not come back with whatever Revelations says. I know I've read it, but I can't remember it right off the top of my head. So, and then of course we have Bristow Cogden, and he's interesting. They don't know if he was Native or African American, but it really shows that the vampirism in New England kind of transcended. Oh, okay.
All right, we're getting a message here. Somebody's getting ready to join us. I didn't quite catch all that. Dezombified.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Hard by numbers. Come on in here. Okay, they're sending you the link on Twitter now. We'll go ahead and continue. Get in here. Yeah, we'd love to have you up here with us, but you've got some amazing questions for our guest Andy this morning. Andy Evilvitz, sure. Now, your interest in vampires and vampirism, you've got such an extensive knowledge. You've obviously been interested in this for a while and done an amazing amount of research and study on your own. What brought that about? Was it just a natural curiosity or?
Well, when I was a little girl, every year, except for 1 year, I was actually a witch. And I know that's shocking because I'm definitely all witchy now. But every single year when I was a child, I dressed up as a vampire. Every year. Nobody even had to ask how my costume was. I absolutely loved vampires. I found it absolutely fascinating that the dead could rise and attack the living. And maybe it's because I'm Saturday born, like I said, that instant vampire hunter thing. And a kid's imagination, you run around and, oh, I'm going to get a vampire. I'm going to, you know, and that type of thing. So it really started with that. And then, of course, The Enchanted World by Time Life Books. My grandpa bought me that. And there's a few very good spooky stories in there about vampires and ghosts and witches and everything else.
And I remember in the TV commercials for that series, they would show, I think, the staking of a vampire, something going on there. They used to have the best commercials and recreate stuff out of those books.
Right. And then my grandpa was very lucky. He would read me really good works of literature. I think my love and interest of witchcraft came when he read Macbeth, or as they say, that old Scottish play. And I was so fascinated with the three witches that I began looking into that. And before that, it was Edgar Allan Poe. And then the thing that made me so curious about vampires was Dracula. He was so scared to read that book. And he read it and it scared him. And it is a very, very eerie book to read. Of course, that isn't the first vampire book, and it certainly wasn't the last, but it's certainly one of the most influential books on vampire lore. So that began my fascination with that. And then from there, I just kind of went and began studying folklore and what do vampires do, what do they not do, and it just kind of morphs from there. But I'm always reading something about vampires. So it's just a, I guess, macabre fascination of mine.
Hello.
Hey, horror by numbers. Come on in. How are you doing today?
I'm not bad, thank you. And how is everyone else?
Everyone's good. Thanks for joining us.
Wonderful. It'll only be a short trip, I'm afraid. Well, a short visit, because I've got to go out and pick the kids up.
Okay, well, come on in. Ask us some questions. Got to find out, though, since you mentioned football, soccer.
Yes.
Who's your team?
I don't like football.
You're probably one of the few British people I've ever met that said that. But all right, right on. Good on you.
Yeah, I can't get on with it. It's just, it's a lot of overpaid people kicking a ball around and doesn't really appeal for me.
That's kind of like run, kick, run, kick. Okay.
Yeah, and it's all the falling on the ground and rolling around and.
You got to make it look good for the fans, the people that are paying those exorbitant.
Yeah. It's expensive.
So, what would you like to contribute or to ask Andy about this morning, or by numbers?
Right. So, what got you started? What gave you the inspiration to sort of keep going and to start the channel up?
My research in vampires and things like that.
Yeah.
It's really weird. I guess I'm kind of a research nerd, so I'll get an idea and I always make a joke when something gets in my head, I'm on it like a sauce on ribs. I mean, I cannot let it go.
Love that phrase. You cracked me up with that the other day.
So I get a hold of it and then I look at it, and when I do research, I start cross comparing and just, I love research in itself, but I especially love to research anything that's a secret or a mystery or something arcane or the occult. It's so funny. I have to tell this joke. I already told Steve. Well, it's not really a joke. I was born in Las Vegas.
Yep. And
so my mom saved the horoscopes for that day when I was born in Las Vegas. And the first line on the horoscope said, this person will be an occult loving individual and will make it a lifelong study or something like that. But that occult loving individual was right there. And I was like, oh yeah, that's so me.
Yeah, you got it right on the money there.
So it's always been just a really interesting fascination. Of course, my grandfather fueled that with Vincent Price movies. And like I said, he would read me Shakespeare and Edgar Allan Poe, and he would read me Dracula. And he was a big guy, even though he was old.
Yeah.
He was still, I think, 6'4", 6'5",
Oh,
well to his 70s. You know, a lot of times old people start bending over, and this was him bent over. I mean, he was a big guy, and he'd plop up on my bed, and he would sit and read me these wonderful stories.
Oh.
And it was a wonderful thing. I always describe my grandpa as, if you ever want to know what Andy's grandpa's like, go watch Betty Boop's over at Grampy's house. And that's a perfect example of the type I had, and the type of grandpa I tell all men that you want to aspire to be, because that makes memories for generations to come, for your family and your descendants coming on. So
Wonderful.
But vampires has always been my love. I was telling Steve I dressed up as one every single Halloween, and
well,
so,
the lore is it's very fascinating when it does come to vampires. I mean, are you a believer of the whole idea that it was based off of Vlad the Impaler, or do you believe that vampires as a whole generally go further back in history?
no, they've proven, well, like I said, the patron saint of vampires, Saint Marcellus, died in 490. So we have the folklore way before Vlad the Impaler. As a matter of fact, we even have books. The first fiction was John Polidorus's The Vampire in 1820.
Right.
And then you also have Varney the Vampire. And this was the Great Penny Dreadful. It was, what, 900 pages? And
Right,
I think first installment was 1845, and then they re-released it in installments again in 1847. You have LaFon's book, Carmilla. That's another big one, 1872. And these are just books in English. There are tons of books written in German and French, and a lot of men and women back in those days could read German and French as easily as they had English, so there was no reason to translate. Unlike today, a lot of us don't speak 2 or 3 languages anymore.
No.
But I know that Bram Stoker himself read a book.
Yeah.
He never went to Transylvania, so he just read something about rulers or something. It was a very quick book. I do not remember the name right off the top of my head, and I probably should have wrote it down. But the book that he read just mentioned Vlad Dracul. And of course, Dracul, or Dracula, which people think son of the dragon, I believe might be misinterpreted. They thought it, because a lot of people say it means son of the devil. And so he wrote that, and you have this tyrant, and he was given a very bad name. You know, he went in and attacked a lot of Saxon people, the Saxon people that came from Germany and had been there a few centuries. He cleansing those people out, as he would put it. So he was very anti-Saxon and was the devil there. And yet in Romania, where he was at, and well, today it's Romania, he's considered somewhat of a folk hero. So I think he used him to make him more aristocratic and interesting. But I honestly am inconclusive if Vlad Tepes is actually a vampire. So.
I definitely learned something new today.
Would have been a good thing to make up about yourself to strike fear in the hearts of your fellow countrymen there. But it makes you wonder, what is it about, in particular, those two, Vlad Tepes and Countess Elizabeth Bathory, that it just stuck and became so legendary, when there are others that were just as bad, if not worse, into the whole blood ritual thing?
Well, I think the thing is they were put in fantastic stories. Nobody would have known who Dracula was if it wasn't for Bram Stoker.
True.
And of course, back when Elizabeth Bathory was going around, you had these fantastic storytellers. I mean, they would just stand up on something and completely pull you in and enthrall you. And then those stories would go home, and grandpas and grandmas would sit and tell the stories. And the fact that it's so morbid, I mean, look at our fascination with serial killers and the evil people of today and what they do. So I think it's just something like that just survived the test of time and comes through in little bits and pieces.
Hmm.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just about to say, it's very similar to the, in a sense, to the old Western stories. That's the writ about, was it Billy the Kid and Mark Twain. Am I thinking that right?
Right.
Where they essentially wrote stories about them, which were, for the most part, made up or very fictional, with a very small nugget of truth in there. But
Right.
by doing that, it sort of created a household name, in a sense. And like you were saying, I think they've kind of done that with Vlad the Impaler, in a way, or in a very similar way, anyway.
Right.
Where he became a household name simply because of the wonderful stories that were written about him. But yeah, it's
Yeah, that's
interesting.
absolutely true. And one of the other big books, it was actually an essay, but it changed into a book, that influenced Dracula is The Land Beyond the Forest. And the essay itself was Transylvanian Superstitions. Emily Gerard wrote that. She was married to a Hungarian military, I believe he was cavalry commander, and lived there for 2 years. And she really talked about Transylvania being the last place of safety for the old gods and witches and these spirits of old. And I mean, you could almost see what she was talking about in your mind's eye. She was a very, very good writer. And I know that had a lot of influence on the Dracula tale itself. So it was really well done. It's surprising what you can learn in your library. The man that wrote all of the Conan stories and all of the Solomon Kane, and I think Ron Brackmore is another one, and I'm probably saying that one wrong. But he lived in a little town of Texas. You could literally blink. I think today it still has one gas station and a few houses. And I mean, he was literally in the middle of nowhere, but he went to the library and read all these travel journals and everything, and picked kind of this period where he could really kind of make his own world, and created wonderful, fascinating things with that. So I think the storytelling and getting good resources is important in your study of vampires and everything else. I know there's a wonderful book from the 70s, In Search of Dracula. Some people have heard of it and some haven't.
I have owned a copy. I don't have one right now. It's kind of hard to find, and I sold a lot of copies.
Yeah, Raymond McNally and Radu, how do you say it, Florshu or something? I don't know. I'm saying that wrong. Florshu wrote that, and it's really fascinating about that. And one of the things they talk about is they went to Dracula's supposed castle, and the bats had a rabies epidemic, and they said it's not like a regular one. This one will bite you, and in 2 to 3 days you're like a rabid maniac. So I always thought that was interesting with the Dracula tale.
We have a local-ish legend in the UK. It's called the Whitby Vampire, and it's an old abbey. Most of it's destroyed now, but it dates back thousands of years. And there was a sort of tale that went around that during the, I think, 1700s, a vampire moved into the abbey and took it over, and lived there for however many years, and he eventually disappeared. And it was really funny because when I was a kid, they sort of did a bit of a tourist trap thing where they had a coffin, a concrete coffin in the ground, which they claimed that said vampire slept in. If you go back to it now, though, that doesn't exist anymore, and you can't find any information on it because they dug it up and removed it.
That is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, they say that if a vampire survives 7 years of rising out of its grave, it can become a man again. It can become human-like again. It could actually move to the next town or move wherever it wants to, and it can get married and have children, and the children are actually living vampires, and upon their deaths, they will rise from the grave like their father and continue on the family business, I guess. But I always found that bit of folklore a little bit interesting myself. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, England is full of vampires, and Scotland too. I think I saw a story on that. I still have to look that up. Like I said, if you pick one part of folklore, you will be searching and searching and going down so many different paths for years and years and years. You just kind of let it get a hold of you, and you learn something new every day, which is probably why I like studying it so much. So,
good one to look into is the Highgate Cemetery vampire.
oh, I remember those stories.
Yeah.
That's wonderful, and it's a beautiful cemetery.
Oh, it is. It's lovely. Yeah, that one's an interesting one. I did a little bit of research into that, and there were a lot of people that claimed that the guy that's sort of reported on it, and he apparently had wrote books on it as well. He was a little insane.
Is it Sean Manchester or Bishop?
I think so. It sounds familiar.
It might be him. I don't know if I have the name right.
I'm really bad with names, so I always forget. So, especially when I read this sort of thing, it's very difficult for me to cite names and publications because I always forget them. But I generally remember the information.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that was in the 70s, right?
Yes, it was during the 70s. Apparently, there had been some death, I think, related to it as well. Somebody had actually died in the cemetery.
I think there was some type of accident or something where they shut it down and wouldn't let people come in anymore. So I think somebody was murdered in there or something like that.
Yeah, and a few tombs had been smashed open as well. But the guy that had reported on it said that they'd been smashed from the inside out.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Now that's very creepy.
Very. But again, there was no conclusive evidence or proof or anything like that because there never is.
No, there isn't.
Which is always a bit annoying because you think, did somebody do something to make sure that there wasn't any
right. Well, I mean, and you have to hand it, even if the government covered something up. Can you imagine how horrible it would be if the news and the government officials actually reported there was a real vampire running around and it's been proven? Can you imagine the chaos that would ensue in something like that?
Something they've hidden, just like the UFO cover-up.
Right. I mean, sometimes it's just best not to know. So
sometimes, yeah. I think in that sort of instance, I mean, I do believe that vampires did exist at one point or another. I don't think that if there are any, there probably isn't very many of them left.
No, I would agree with you on that. With embalming and the way that they do the funerary practices today, it probably isn't happening as much anymore. And I think in the more rural parts of the world or the faraway places where they still wrap their dead in a shroud and bury them, it's probably very, very possible. I mean, there are still places in the world that modernism has not gone to yet. And in those places, you probably have a few interesting things happening. And
there's definitely some interesting stuff. Go on.
Go ahead.
There's even the sort of modern take on vampirism as well, where there are people that believe that they need to drink blood in order to feel healthy. And then there are those that believe that they have to in order to survive.
Right, and then they have the willing donors that go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's more of a modern take on it.
A vampire at the head there, that's kind of creepy. And then a lot of times they'll pin that vampire moniker on serial killers. I mean, you have it's got the vampire of Dusseldorf,
right?
Peter Cushing. And then here in the States had Richard Chase back in the 70s and I think early 80s, the vampire of Sacramento, and these people drank their victims' blood. And it's like, were they driven by that bloodlust, or was that just incidental, or some kind of almost like a fetish or something they had? It gives you pause to ponder, just to.
It also reminds me of Renfield.
That's it.
Yeah, how Renfield's character was. He wasn't really a vampire yet, but he had that bloodlust because he got a little bit of vampire in him and went completely insane. You know what? I want to stay and talk to you, gentlemen. You know I love doing the show, but I have to take my little senior and high school girl to work because she works the lunch shift. So,
well, Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll continue at another time. Glad to have you back. Feel free to come on anytime. Just let me know when you'd like to come on, and we'll make it happen. I'm always looking for new and interesting guests or somebody to fill a time slot. So that would be stellar. We'll always have a good time when you're around.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for letting me come on today. And thank you for calling in. That's wonderful. Horror by the numbers, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Check out his channel. I've put the link in the chat there. That's some interesting stuff. Wanted to ask you about one of your videos there, Horror by Numbers. You've got Keanu Reeves. Do you think now, a couple of 100 years from now, if humanity survives, that they'll be talking about how Keanu Reeves was immortal, or maybe he'll still be around?
Well, I think my theory on this one is that if he is immortal, he wouldn't at that point be known as Keanu Reeves. It would be somebody else. Because in order for him to sort of keep his identity a secret in that sense, he would have to take on a new personality or a new name or a new identity each generation. Because if he didn't, obviously they would capture him and he'd be in a lab somewhere being picked apart. But immortality...
There's some compelling evidence out there.
There's some very interesting stuff.
He has aged somewhat, but not that much, not for how much you think he would under, the circumstances and stuff.
No, he seems to sort of keep his young looks for quite a long time. But it depends on the definition of immortality. Does he age and then he's reborn? So could he come back in a generation?
Dorian Gray, and somewhere in an attic there's a painting of him that's aging.
Who knows? Could it be that he gets to a certain point and he sort of reverts back to a younger version of himself, almost molts like a like a butterfly in a sense? It could be anything really.
Young Keanu crawls out and goes and starts a career somewhere. That's
he could go off doing something completely different.
Stuff I think about really, really late at night when I'm going on. Of course, live alone anyway. I'm always the only one here besides my dog, but you know what I mean. When the world's asleep, you see those imponderable thoughts that you are indeed pondering.
Oh God, yeah, no, I have way too many of them. So it's some of them keep me awake, and others help me sleep at night. But I'm always interested in things like that because there's quite a few examples of celebrities or certain figures that are in the limelight not aging very much at all, and then there's photo evidence of certain people going back decades, hundreds of years, even thousands of years, portraits of people that have a striking resemblance to somebody that we know now. Now, whether or not that's simply down to genetics and that there's only so many combinations that it can be formed in, and you're going to get people that look like people, a bit like doppelgangers, or if it is actually down to some form of immortality, it's I don't know. But it is interesting.
I've seen some of those where they have like John Travolta and Nicolas Cage and all these people that have what looks like, you said, a doppelganger.
Yeah.
Again, from hundreds of years ago. Eddie Murphy's another that springs to mind. Jay-Z. I've seen pictures of all these people and their counterparts, and it is eerie how much they resemble one another. Like you said, is it just some sort of genetic lottery where the same numbers just happen to pop up, and you got, it's like there are only so many combinations, but it's still, what are the odds? It's got to be in the billions that people that are related would look at. like, but I suppose anything's possible.
Well, that's it. It is interesting, though. I mean, one of the things that I really find fascinating is when they dig up technology that should not have existed at that time. I think is really
the batteries they've found, like the sites with stuff in antiquities, or I read about somewhere where they found what appears to be a wristwatch, encased in a piece of rock that's probably tens of thousands of years old.
Yeah, they've found spark plugs. They found a hammer from something like 2 million years ago. That was way before we were metalworking. I mean, we didn't even really exist then. It was a precursor to us. I mean, we've only been on this planet for a couple 100,000 years, if that. As Homo sapien. But it does make you wonder whether or not time travel is possible, because if it is, then that means that people have gone back, took something with them, accidentally left it behind, or possibly even got stuck there and used the knowledge that they knew from the future to create a comfortable living for themselves then.
Kind of like in Back to the Future, where he gets the magazine with all the sports information.
Yeah, the almanac.
Yeah. Knows how to bet to win big, or man, you could play the stock market. You could become the Beatles before the Beatles.
You see, that would only work for a couple of bets, because the moment you start altering history, it has a ripple effect outwards. So you may get the first few bets
butterfly
on.
Now that kind of leads me. What do you think of the Mandela effect?
I've had a few weird issues with that one myself, because there are certain things that I do remember very vividly, and nobody else does. It's so weird. It's like the Matrix. There's a very good scene in the Matrix where he says something along the lines, "What if I told you that the world that you're living in is a lie?" He never says that in the entire movie now. Ever.
Isn't that amazing? And just some of the lines that have changed that are in popular culture.
God, yeah.
Life is like a box of chocolates. Now it's life was like a box of chocolates, which makes no sense.
It doesn't. And people are arguing, well, Forrest Gump was, not that clever, so he may say that sentence wrong, but even throughout the entire movie, he doesn't really do anything like that. So it doesn't make sense for him to, at that point, get that wrong, so badly wrong as well.
And another one that really gets me is from the Bond film Moonraker. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yes, where he bites through the metal steel cable, Odd Job, and he meets the young, is it the Swedish girl?
I think so.
Yeah,
with braces, but yet now she doesn't have braces, and that was the whole thing, because he had those big steel teeth, and it makes absolutely no sense for them to have that moment and fall for each other like they do. And there was even like a credit card commercial, like for American Express or something later on, and it had that same scenario where they had Richard Kiel in the commercial, and he fell for a girl with braces. And that blows my mind, because I remember seeing that scene.
I remember that as well.
Comedy bit of it there was, this tiny little girl, but she's metal mouth too, and he's just wow. But now that.
Yeah, I mean, I watched it as a kid, and I do remember that scene, because I remember laughing, thinking, oh, he's finding somebody that he loves, somebody like him. And then for him to say that, no, she was never wearing any braces, it's like, oh, hang on. It doesn't make any sense.
Another one that blows my mind, Bible verses. I've always heard, and the lion shall lie down with the lamb. And now it's the wolf and the lamb. I've always heard the lion and the lamb, so...
See, I'm not overly clued up on Bible verses, so for me, I wouldn't be 100% sure on that one. I wouldn't be able to say that it's one or the other from memory, because it's not something that I've sort of come across.
So many of them out there, the Star Wars, and the original Nelson Mandela. I remember him dying back in I think it was sometime in the 80s.
I'd have been too young for that one. But I do remember the Star Wars. I remember watching that. 3CPO didn't have a silver leg.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of pictures, toys, and a lot of people saying that he did have a silver leg.
Yeah, in my timeline, he didn't have a silver leg. And that's what a lot of people are saying now, that somewhere along the way, the timelines split or merged, or split and merged back together, or something like that. So some people, what they remember really happened in their timeline, and likewise, people in the other timeline. So for some people, he did have a gold leg or a silver leg. Some people, he didn't.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, the whole idea of a multiverse, it makes sense. Because quantum physics dictates that anything that can happen will happen, which is essentially saying that every choice you make has to have multiple choices or multiple effects at some point down the, at some point. So if I decide I want to pick that cup up, it's also true that I didn't. So in order for that to play out and for quantum physics to even work, there has to be multiple universes, multiple instances, all running along the same line, in a sense. Otherwise, our entire knowledge of physics would be completely wrong. It's one of those that, for it to work, quantum physics has to work. If it didn't work, quantum physics wouldn't work. It's very weird.
People that are trying to tie the Mandela effect into whatever they're up to at CERN, the laboratory in Switzerland.
Yes, I have heard that one. When they started experimenting trying to find the God particle, they reckon that it's something to do with that they did accidentally breach between universes, and little snippets of it came through, whereas other things didn't. I mean, it's theoretically possible, but I think in the same likelihood, it's also possible for them to create a black hole. Because I mean, they're playing with particles that birthed the planet, birthed the universe, in a sense.
Again, it boggles the mind to think that
it does.
Maybe there is out there. And would that mean that time travel was possible? Because there's that theory, that time is not a continuous stream, that it branches and it ebbs and flows. And
oh god, yeah. I mean, time travel can get so confusing. There's so many different theories. I mean, there's the grandfather paradox.
Yeah, could you go back and see yourself? And
if you killed your granddad, would you ever be born?
I've heard some stories about this friend of mine that knew somebody that he was haunting the house he grew up in as a child. Even though he was an adult, he'd gone back to visit his boyhood home. And the guy was describing, he said, there's a ghost here. Was there a ghost when you lived here? And the guy's like, no, my father built this house. I grew up here. And the man keeps describing this boy that he sees. And the guy's like, wait a minute. He goes home, gets his family photos and brings them back, whips out a picture, holds it up. And the guy's like, that's him. That's the little boy that I see run around in the house in the yard and thing. He just disappears. And the guy says, that's me when I was 5 years old. So what's going on there? Now, he did say that he was really traumatized at having to move from his boyhood home. He'd lived there all his life up until the age of like 16 or 17. And it made him so sad and depressed that he even contemplated ending his life. So that energy, did that spring out a thought for him that the child him missed it so bad that it found a way to pop out and stay there? And just, again, imponderables, things that you sit and think about.
Well, that's it. I mean, I do believe in ghosts. I don't think they're a spiritual thing. I think there is possibly a scientific explanation for them. I mean, the human body is made up of energy. Mm-hmm. A lot of it as well.
And there are residual hauntings like that where it seems the same thing just played over and over and over. And you think about like a videotape or an audio tape.
Yep.
It's just ferrous oxide, that's particles on a piece of mylar that are charged one way or the other that can recreate a sound or an image with the right playback equipment. And I kind of think that could be what's happening. Like maybe certain kinds of rock, quartz or something like that, it somehow retains that energy because, like you said, we're all energy. Everything is energy. And then somehow when the conditions are just right, it sort of plays little bits of it back. Fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, the entire planet's covered in magnetic poles, and we know from science that magnetics or magnetism can play an effect on electrons.
Yeah.
I mean, you have electromagnets.
All that, and then all the ancient sites that are connected along those ley lines, not just really throughout the world. You can start drawing dots, and it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think those that poltergeist, for example, they're very active and incredibly powerful. And I think they're another form of that energy, but it's much stronger, more condensed. And they have a level of autonomy, but don't really remember who they are. So they're frustrated, angry, and I think that's the reason why poltergeists are considered so evil in a sense. I mean, they're not particularly evil. I mean, the word poltergeist means noisy ghost, but they can be somewhat mischievous as well. And that may be whoever it was that died had enough energy left over, or the energy that didn't dissipate anywhere near as much as what it would with a residual haunting, and they're given some level of control. But like I said, the memories of who they were probably long gone. And that's what I think poltergeists are anyway, or something along those lines. There's
a lot of different happen in a place where there's some other turmoil going on. Seems like a teenage girl approaching puberty or going through the changes of puberty.
And they feed off that energy.
Somewhat common occurrence there with poltergeist activity.
Oh yeah, they just feed off it. So I mean, you output a fair bit of energy anyway. We haven't really figured a way of harnessing it yet because it's bioelectrical energy. It's very difficult to harness. But they reckon that they're getting closer. I mean, they're looking at technology now that charges itself off your own biorhythms. So it never needs charging as such.
Well, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been fascinating too. Love to have you back on again sometime, then whenever you're available.
Yeah, we'll try and get on.
I'll have you on.
A few days free coming up over next week or two, so hopefully I should be able to get on.
Okay.
But thank you very much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
Dezombified, would you guys like to come in and say hello to Horror by Numbers? Have you been on their show before, like their evening?
I have, yes.
I thought, first time having you here on the morning Horde Rush. There's so many different shows and stream stuff. I kind of forget and when and whatnot. But
I try to keep track of them.
I'm a subscriber to your channel. I'm kind of gotten behind though. You've got some stuff on there. I'm going to have to go watch now and see. And it looks like you do some streams on there too. I can see a 7 video.
That 7-hour stream is literally just it's all my videos put together.
Okay, that's the one then. And that one caught my eye there. Good Mythical Morning is a Lie. Those guys kind of annoy me anyway, but it's like a car wreck or a dead animal. You can't not look at it if you see one of their videos. I've got to see what you got to say about them. All right. Thanks again. Dezombified, did you guys want to come in and say anything, or we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here? Hey, Swedish Mom, good to see you in the...
Yes, hi.
Anybody else that I may have missed, I get fascinated here with whatever we're talking about. And okay, we're going to go ahead and just wrap it up here. Dezombified, I've got some things going on. They apologize for not being able to come in. My numbers, thank you for for popping in this morning unexpectedly. Those are always wonderful surprises like that when we get someone like you that's knowledgeable and articulate and loves all things that creep, crawl, slither, and go bump in the night. So,
oh, well, thank you very much.
I'm going to have you back on soon. So I'm going to check out your channel more thoroughly, more in depth. I'm going to binge that stream, I think, today. But
it's a long one.
All right, looking forward to it. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for today. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to my other host, Tanya Jones. Again, happy birthday, Tanya. Many happy returns on the day. And we want to thank our guests, Andy Evilvich, and then our surprise guest, Horror by Numbers. Want you all to have a good day, night, evening, morning, whatever it is, wherever you are, have a good one. I'm Steve Stockton, aka 13 Past Midnight. I'm right in the middle of 31 days of Halloween on my channel. Come check it out. New video for this. And I'm getting something in my ear here. What was that, Stereo? Okay, we're gonna go raid Timey Lives after the stream ends here in just a moment. If I could get Dezombified to pop her channel link into the chat there. She's a wonderful lady. She has a little coffee break show in the morning. She just full of love and positivity, kind of like Dezombified, but it's a good show. There's the link. All right, let's go for a raid. I think they're going to play us out with a Z-Horde anthem. Again, I'm Steve Stockton, 13 Past Midnight. I love each and every one of you. Mwah. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Ooh.